Hello, everybody. Welcome to Noetic. I am CJ, and it is my pleasure to be joined by Jordan Cline.
Greetings.
And she is going to lead us in a discussion of the 13th essay, the 13th chapter of Michel de Montaigne's essays. And it is gloriously titled Ceremony at the Meeting of Kings.
Yeah.
Something that I'm sure we all experience on a day-to-day basis, but
Absolutely.
Jordan's going to help us try to make some sense of such a antiquated experience that
Yeah.
you and I probably don't face every day, and hopefully we can grasp something of value to our lives. And I'm sure we will, because Montaigne, the 16th century French essayist, the founder of the genre, seems to grasp some sort of truth and experience of human nature in anything that he writes about, because he is writing of his own views, but also just of what humans are. And the ceremonies of meetings of kings seems to have a lot about human nature in it, or just I think the ceremonies of manners and how we operate in that regard is so fascinating. And I will let you start.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So, essentially, even though this title is called Ceremony at the Meetings of Kings, this struck me as a short little essay on manners, essentially. It's sort of an Emily Post guide circa 1530, thereabout, right? Something like that. And so my favorite thing is this introduction, which he asserts that there's no subject matter that is too frivolous or too ridiculous that doesn't really deserve a place in the works. So
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, because there seems to be something useful or telling of what we are as human beings and what a good life is in anything. And he chooses, like you said, manners.
Manners of all things.
Which,
yeah, and what's especially interesting is that there are power dynamics in manners, which I wasn't aware of, which I thought was like super fascinating.
Yeah, go into that. What do you mean by power
there's
dynamics?
a little bit of sort of this one-upmanship and this sort of politicking within manners and what you can communicate through manners. Like the one king, I think the French king, making the Pope wait at his place of residence for him to come home, and he said, "Oh no, like, don't worry, Pope. Just put your feet up, relax from your long journey. Don't worry, I'm gonna be there." But it's basically the Pope waiting on the king's time.
Ah, okay. So the
So
king has a one-up.
Subtle things like that, or the I think it was the Holy Roman Emperor, I think, who made the Pope, or had the Pope arrive first into I think Bologna, and then the Emperor came in second to upstage that elaborate entrance. So subtle things like that, where you can sort of tweak these sort of like political dynamics through these sort of ceremonial machinations, right?
Yeah, and I'll quote Montaigne where he says, talking of letting one person come in before the other, or any of these kind of entrances, he says, "It is in this way that this formality is intended to make it appear as if it were the person of lesser degree that is visiting and paying his court to the greater, and not vice versa," in the sense that you can even flip that around too, where, oh, come to me, come to my kingdom, and visit me, and I will, wait for you here, where you can in a sense, be the higher power, while the other person, oh, thank you for letting me come to your house or to your kingdom.
Castle.
Yeah. That can be another sort of way of putting power dynamics into it.
Yeah, or even something to the effect of, hey, CJ, like, you and I have beef, so let's settle this. You come to my castle and we'll work this out. Let's meet for a 9 a.m. meeting. And then you and your posse could show up at 8:50, and you get your dais and you get your nice fancy chair set up. So then when I walk in, it looks like, oh, CJ, you're hosting me all of a sudden now. That's what it looks like. Oh, Jordan, how kind of you to join me for this lovely meeting at your castle, but I'm pulling the stunt last second, so I look more powerful. So
it just seems
there are these sort of silly things. And what's my favorite is like Montaigne's just complete aversion to any of this sort of stuff. He's just
how is he
I will
like?
have none of this. And I shall read I'll just like read a quick quotation because it's just too good not to read it. For my part, I often neglect both of these empty formalities since I curtail all ceremony in my house. If any take offense, what shall I do? Better to offend him once than myself every day. That would be perpetual slavery.
Yeah, go into that because I think Montaigne
goes
into this idea that manners, or like you said, of having this whole universe of manners in your head of like one-upmanship of, oh, am I being more polite or doing this or that can almost be binding to you where you don't really know what to do or you're kind of locked down.
And I kind of think this speaks to who Montaigne is as a person, right? Because if we think about his sort of like quick and slow speech and like the earthly ambitions of, his sort of like sort of faulting sort of like memory, right? It's he says, to some degree, because I can't remember things that well, I can't do these sort of like elaborate, flattering sort of speeches. And it's sort of in that same vein, he's just like, you know what? I don't really do this whole earthly politicking ridiculousness because I don't want to be a slave to everyone else's opinions, and I just don't feel like entertaining people that lavishly.
And that's not to say that Montaigne...
I'm not going to have like a Downton Abbey entrance with all of my staff outside, like waiting to like greet my guest.
And that's not to say that Montaigne isn't polite or has manners, or doesn't have manners.
Right, because at the same side of the coin, it's sort of a, in moderation, I think, argument of where he says, manners can be really good, and, every place in the world has its own form of etiquette, but he doesn't want to be restrained by it. And he talks a little bit about the downfalls, which could be... sometimes for him, in his mind, that ignoring these certain rules of etiquette are so elaborate that it's almost a favor to guests. And there's sometimes where he, says too much civility can be a bad thing.
Yeah.
And I think you and I off camera talked a little bit about the different interpretations of that. So I interpreted that as being so dialed into these manners that you easily take offense to things of, how dare she? I do not have a dessert fork, but CJ does. Our dinner host clearly likes you more than she likes me. I'm like very upset about this.
Yeah, and I think that goes into the idea of somebody becoming, as Montaigne says, tiresome in their courtesy.
Yeah, like
you just have too much. Yeah, you're just too civil. You have too many rules floating in your head of dinner forks and where I should put my hand at the dinner table and when I should arrive, how I should exit, when I should exit, it ruins any sort of spontaneity or general human interaction.
Yeah, and I think it's so interesting, though, even though because it is in the 16th century, he kind of has that very modern approach of, don't overthink it. It's like a quick or slow speech where overthinking things can make you like awkward and like clumsy and weird. He's like, hey man, like, be cool, be effortless, like, don't overthink this.
No, that's
don't over fancy this, essentially.
No, that's one of his appeals, is that even past what we're looking at, ceremony at the meeting of kings, something that is irrelevant to a 21st century mind, that this idea of moderation and of using manners to a certain extent, that they are useful, but too much is too much.
Right.
That is very, again, like you said, a very contemporary view, and to hear that in a 16th century writer is quite extraordinary, and it just seems like a voice of reason, or of right, that's exactly how it should be, and that connection is huge with a writer, or with somebody that we're reading,
right? And he writes about the sort of relief of sort of fleeing all these sort of trappings of court life, and that's not obviously something we can necessarily relate to, but to me it almost seemed like the equivalent of going to like a party or like a fancy event where you're really suited up and like you're really dressed up, and then like it's the second when you get home and like you order pizza, when you're like, got my jammies on and my pizza, I'm like so excited just to like relax.
Yeah, but if you carried that formality back into your house, then what would be the point of having that escape?
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Of your house, of being
like,
able to dress however in your jammies or anything like that.
Yeah.
That there is that escape, and that we need that, and that, like, I mean, it's like you said, moderation, and like Montaigne says that that there's a point of having court life or manners, right? Of maybe even having a work environment where we have our strict rules of application and instruction, like you said.
Sort of mores.
Yeah, mores. And then to go home and to use those, or to go out and be very quote-unquote professional. Maybe that is our equivalent, professional.
Yeah, that might be it.
And if you're just professional even at home, what's the point of, again, that escape?
Yeah, exactly. Like, what's the point in sort of fleeing it? And I think that this essay isn't necessarily Montaigne trashing manners, though. Because closing this out, he actually does say that manners are still important, because they sort of foster this, like, sociability and friendliness, and they can be really great if they're instructive, or if they make you sort of more communicative. And I'll offer one example in my own life. I had this one classmate in my undergrad, and she had this really wonderful practice of saying pardon whenever she misheard something or didn't catch what the other person said. She would just say, pardon? And I was so floored. I was so, like, stunned by the sheer classiness of it that I've just tried using that in my everyday life.
Yeah, and that's wonderful, because that's what manners should be. It seems like, right? Where you have these things that are useful and instructive, and then you embody that in your own life, and you pick and choose certain things,
and you become like I would say a better person for it.
Yeah, and I'll quote Montaigne, where he says, friendliness and okay, let me try to find it again. Like grace and beauty, and he's talking about manners, it smooths over the first approaches to sociability and friendliness, and consequently opens the door of instruction by the example of others, just like your friend being an example to you, teaching us to cultivate and set an example ourselves, if it has anything instructive and communicable. Where your friend's little pardon had instruction, because it was a polite, and not only polite but respectful way to respond to somebody. If
it's just a thoughtful way to reply to someone,
and it was easily taken up, and you did. And it's not overbearing to anyone. It's not you're not
exactly.
you're not being tiresome in that courtesy. It's just a nice little salt that you kind of put on your own manners, and it's not like you're just putting all these herbs and salts where it just becomes
and it's not
tasteless.
like it's not being totally didactic and like beating someone over the head.
Mm-mm.
It's just, I think what Montaigne's getting at is like, it's just subtle. It's subtle, it should be easy, and it should come to you naturally.
And very modern, like you said. And I think that's just one of the many appeals Montaigne has to us today. And that's really great.
Absolutely. So if you, that's about it for me. And CJ?
Pardon?
So if you found this podcast appealing, then check us out on the Noetic app, which you can download in the App Store or Google Play. Yeah, Google Play. Catch us on YouTube, SoundCloud, and I think that's pretty much it for all the outlets right now, right?
Yes.
Cool. Okay, so thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you guys next week, and bye for now.